What happens when Catholics spend years asking for the traditional Latin Mass, only to find locked church doors? For many traditional Catholics, that claim sounds simple. For one American woman, that question shaped her entire life. One of those Catholics is American author and librarian Claire B. Dunkel. She has attended SSPX Masses for 51 years in 7 U.S. states and 3 European countries. The story begins in the years after the Second Vatican Council. She was only a child when the Novice Ordo Mass was introduced. Even at 5 years old, she sensed that something had changed. Her family watched familiar traditions disappear. Sanctuaries became noisier. The atmosphere of prayer felt different. Her mother was deeply troubled. A college professor with a doctorate, her mother began researching. She studied the council documents and the instructions connected to Pope Paul VI's new Mass. What she discovered surprised her. The traditional Latin Mass had never been formally banned, so she approached their pastor with a simple idea. The parish already offered English, Spanish, and children's Masses. Why not a Latin Mass as well? The pastor agreed to consider it if enough parishioners supported the idea. Soon, mother and daughter were going door to door collecting signatures. By the end, about 90% of parishioners had signed the petition. The family believed their efforts had succeeded. Instead, when the petition was presented, the pastor reacted with anger. He publicly scolded them and later called the mother at home to continue the argument. The daughter still remembered hearing his voice through the telephone asking, "Who do you think you are, a theologian?" The mother did not quit. She appealed directly to the bishop. Eventually, permission was granted for one Latin Mass every Sunday, but only in a distant corner of the diocese. The family drove for hours each week to attend. For a short time, they were happy. Then one Sunday they arrived and found the church locked. A handwritten notice announced that the Mass had been canceled. Someone had complained, and the permission was gone. Another door had closed. After more research and letter writing, the mother learned about Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. The retired archbishop had opened a seminary to train priests who wanted to preserve the traditional liturgy. Letters from Catholics around the world poured into his seminary in Icone. Her mother's letters were among them. In 1975, priests from the Society of St. Pius X arrived and began offering the Latin Mass to their community. The author witnessed everything that followed. The society was still small. Conversations constantly revolved around relations with Rome. According to her account, Archbishop Lefebvre never claimed he was saving the church. He simply believed he was fulfilling his duty as a bishop and priest. He repeatedly traveled to Rome seeking understanding. He appealed to Pope Paul VI and later to Pope John Paul II. Yet, in her view, little changed. When Lefebvre was suspended, she recalls that many supporters considered the process irregular. Appeals were prepared, but they never received the hearing they expected. Still, Lefebvre continued trying to work with Rome. Hope appeared in 1984 when permission was granted for certain adult Latin Masses. Yet the local experience disappointed many supporters. Attendance restrictions existed, and some felt the liturgies lacked the reverence they had sought. By 1988, Archbishop Lefebvre was 82 years old. Supporters feared that once he died, there would be no bishops to ordain new priests. They believed the seminaries would eventually disappear. That concern led to the famous episcopal consecrations. On that day, Lefebvre explained his decision. According to the author, he said the bishops were being consecrated not for himself, but for future generations, for children and grandchildren yet to come. 2.5 years later, he died. Many expected the SSPX to fade away. Instead, it continued growing. Today, according to the article, the society has 733 priests, 264 seminarians, and serves roughly 600,000 faithful in 77 countries. New churches and seminaries continue to be built. The author's own chapel community is completing a church that will seat 500 people. Her mother's small rural chapel, with about 150 attendees, has received Mass and sacraments from SSPX priests for more than 50 years. Even during COVID-19 lockdowns, priests celebrated Mass in hangars, fields, tents, and parking lots so families could attend. Looking back, the author sees one consistent pattern. Church leaders ignored the SSPX, restricted it, excommunicated its bishops, later lifted those excommunications, and eventually granted faculties for confession and marriage. Yet she believes the society itself remained unchanged. That is why, she says, Archbishop Lefebvre still matters. Not because he claimed to save the church, but because, in her view, when countless Catholics feared losing the Mass they loved, he refused to leave them behind. And after half a century, she believes his legacy continues to stand.